Hi, and welcome back to Conversations with Coco. After taking a small hiatus in starting this journey with the topics that I wanted to share with you all, life does what it does and changes occur. And I had to make a slight detour in order to get back to where it was my intention to be. And that is to talk about topics that I hope that my experience and what I've learned and what I've researched will absolutely help some people who can share and connect with the thoughts and with the content, and just for me to be a conduit, to be a guide, to be a resource to all of the topics that I'm interested in talking about, including one tonight that is very near and dear to my heart. And, for those of you who follow me on my Instagram page, you'll note that a lot of my hashtags discuss this, and that topic is autism spectrum disorders. Every hashtag, but I hadn't created a video yet because I wanted to be very specific about how I came across um, in those videos and be very, very sensitive to my child who is an ASD child, an autism spectrum disorder child, um, and how he sees that content as a teenager, and in no way come across as violating his privacy, and how I want to share my journey with you all who are deciding to take it with me. So, as folks are aware, there are just a lot of heavy things happening, particularly in the Black community, that leave us feeling drained, that leave us feeling exhausted, yet still every day having to get up and live life with a smile on our faces, and to try to do that with genuine joy in our hearts, despite not knowing what we're going to face when we have to leave the house every day, just to do the normal, average, everyday things. Okay. Um, Before it used to just be difficult to feel safe as a woman going out on the streets as a Black woman. Now it is difficult for our Black men to feel safe leaving their homes, going out in the street, trying to provide for their family, trying to go to school, trying to socially distance and have fun with their family members on a playground in their own backyard, even right here in Durham, North Carolina, where I live, because we had an incident involving some children here that has put our community in quite a bit of an uproar. Now, when I think about that, I think about my son, who is a teenager and a high schooler, who is very tall, who is very chocolate, who is very, very handsome young man, but he absolutely looks older than his age. And he is an autism spectrum disorder child. Um, with that, with that diagnosis comes a lot of challenges. As a mom, you have to learn a whole new way of navigating. One of the things that I like to say about my son is we're all PC computers and he's a Mac computer. He operates phenomenally, but on a different level. That's not typically what everybody uses. Yeah, y'all use iPhones. I happen to be an Android girl myself, but a majority of people use iPhones and Macs when it comes to computers, two sort of very, very different things. Um, so I like to call him a Mac. He's just a different operating system, um, different and better in his own ways, the same way PCs are different and better in their own ways. But it takes a certain kind of person, an individual, to want to be able to understand um, what those different needs and requirements are. When my son was diagnosed, he was initially diagnosed with a condition called Asperger's. Recently, the medical community, just to give you a little bit of background, removed different categories of autism and they took away the term Asperger's, even though a lot of us whose child has been diagnosed with it still tends to utilize Asperger's or Aspie. It is a condition in which the individual has some social skills difficulties. So the way we see things, the way we see what we call neurotypical or normal things, um, our normal responses and reactions to certain situations, an ASD child may not necessarily respond the same way. And so people don't know how to take that because usually it may look like anger, it may look like um, lack of empathy when empathy is required, it may look like I'm being ignored, it may look like a lot of things, it may look like anything except the thing that you expect it to be or what you neurotypically want it to look like. And it's a spectrum, which means their level of social adaptation is very different from one child to another. No spectrum child operates in the exact same way. None of them. None of them. We all know the classical signs, but I'm not going to get into that because that could be a whole dialogue and video in itself. So with that being said, then there absolutely have been challenges. There absolutely will be challenges because he gets older. His needs become more complicated. You think it gets easier because they get more autonomous. It doesn't. So it's like a game system, right? Once you think you've mastered one level, it's time to move on to the next. But here's where the concerns lie, and here's where my points are going this evening. As I mentioned, my concern, for a long time tended to lean heavily toward, women and girls, and not that men don't matter. But I thought more I would have to worry about protecting my daughter. In today's climate, I'm more concerned about protecting my son because not only is he male and Black, he's also an autism spectrum child. And that to a police officer, if he does not know how to handle him, which they typically don't, can look like defiance. So there is an absolute concern anytime my son goes out in the world that nobody can control. Okay. When I think about that, the thought comes to mind that as a mom, how do I still do my job as a mom? And how do I continue to do what I've always done? And that is to provide a protection and a covering for him that is age appropriate, while I teach him like I would teach any neurotypical child to do and become age appropriately autonomous, to send them out in the world, to be a good citizen of the world, considering all of these things surrounding Black Lives Matter. And I can tell you there has been nothing more challenging when you blend those two dynamics together than figuring that out. And one of the things that I will share with you and encourage you if you are watching and you are a parent of a child on the spectrum is that you absolutely have to not create a mindset within yourself that causes you to want to shelter your child even more. And that's hard to tell you guys to do that. I get it, because it's a challenge I face every day. But I'm going to encourage you to start sitting down right now and figuring out, what have you learned so far about your child who has a different need, right? Because really and truly, all of your children have different needs if you have more than one, right? What do I know right now that I can continue doing? What do I know right now that I may need to be doing? And what do I know right now that I want to be doing when it comes to my autism spectrum disorder child? Because you want to be there to support them through their diagnosis, as well as through all the challenges that come along with being an ASD child. And Black Lives Matter if your child is a boy, number one, right? So many things for you to think about and consider. But before this video gets too long, I wanted to share that with you all, to encourage you to think about some things that I want to talk about moving forward, that I've learned, that I've tried to use, that have worked, that haven't worked for me, that I would encourage you to literally get a pen and paper out, and literally start keeping a journal and write some notes so that you can figure out a strategy. Because the more you can make an attempt to plan for it, then the better prepared you will be to deal with these situations as they come, right? So here are some things that I want you to think about. If you have an autism spectrum disorder child, how old is that child? Because your plan and what you know is going to absolutely be age dependent for the child in the moment, okay? Have you been able to identify what your child's niche is, right? For me and my son, I discovered early on that his niche is art. He is an amazing artist. He draws. He does anime. He can do a body in detail. He could draw a person in body in detail like I've not personally seen a kid draw before, right? So I need to first know where my child's strength lies for him and what brings him comfort and how I can connect, okay? So what is your child's, have you identified your child's niche skill? And some of them have more than one skill, right? Or two. What are you doing, or what have you been doing if you already know what that niche skill is? How have you been encouraging, discouraging, supporting, and using it to his, if you have a boy, and in some cases her advantage, because I don't want to leave the girls out either, his or her advantage, to help them be as happy with themselves as they can possibly be. And here's another really important piece, and honestly, in my experience, this is the most important piece of them all. What do you do for yourself as the parent, as the mom or the dad, or both, to create space for yourself in terms of self-care? Are you doing anything at all? Do you have somebody that can provide you respite, depending on where on the spectrum your child is? How are you managing the day-to-day functions, especially given right now that a lot of our children are at home because they can't go to schools, or they can't go to any specialty places for care that we may have taken them before with their therapies to help manage them? What are you doing for yourself, if anything? These are all things that I want you to write down that I would like you to make note of. I'm gonna, as we move forward, share some specific tips and things that I've learned from an age appropriate perspective, what may have worked or what didn't work for me with my son. And also, honestly, how I grew and developed out of trying to figure out these situations for myself once my son was formally diagnosed. Can tell you, second hardest day of my life, finding that out because you feel helpless. Any diagnosis for any family member with a chronic illness will make you feel helpless. And let me end by saying it's okay to feel helpless sometimes. It's okay to not know the answer sometimes because you're not gonna. Guess what? The doctors don't know the answers. But what you do have over other people is that you have love for your child. And that's what we're going to focus on as we move forward in the next video or two, or however many it takes for me to share those tips with you. So I appreciate you guys taking the time to stop by and watch the video. Please, like, share, and subscribe. Again, I want to be able to support and reach out to other people and other parents. If you have some specific topics that you would like me to talk about or would like my opinion on, from this perspective of dealing with a child on the spectrum, I'm happy to share those with you. Please leave them in the comments below this video, or you can go to my IG page and you can DM me with the question if you don't want the question to be public, and I can certainly create a video to share that information with you. My IG page is Convos with Coco. That's Convos _with Coco, COCO, and I'll be happy to share those with you. So until next time, I appreciate you guys watching, and as I always say, come take this journey with me.